Thanks for coming to the talk today. My name is Amanda Legge, and I'm a product designer here at Capital One. So I'm just going to get started. First things first, I've been told that if I want to level up in my design career, I have to start using Twitter. So there's my Twitter handle, and I'm going to start using it after this talk. And then I also want to see how many designers we have in here. OK, a fair amount. And have any of you guys used Principal before? Excellent. OK. So here goes. Prototyping tools. We hear about them all the time. There's paper prototyping. There's Envision. There's Flinto. There's Principal. There's Native. There's Pics. There's Framer.js. There's Axure. There's Marvel. There's Proto.io, et cetera, et cetera. You get my point. There are a lot of prototyping tools out there. So how do you know which one you should use? That's the hot question. So I'm going to do a quick summary of the prototyping tools that I use pretty often, so on a regular basis, or at least I used to use pretty often. So the first one, paper prototyping, pretty much speaks for itself. It's you do sketches, you can get concepts out really fast. It's really good for early projects because you can iterate really fast and get feedback about what works and what doesn't, and you can be really crazy. Then there's Envision. This is also good for early stage projects, but also sort of midway down the line, because you can basically plug in PNGs, and they can be sort of high fidelity or wireframe state. So plug them into Envision, see those blue sort of hotspots up there, you can just connect those up, and it has sort of automatic transitions that you can have, like slide up or whatever like that. The really great thing about Envision is that it's clickable and shareable. So you can send it to your sort of product people or users to test it. Framer.js is another really good one. It can be a little intimidating for some people because you're kind of starting from scratch. You have to sort of like bring in your assets using code, and it uses a JavaScript framework, so you can see the visual on the right side there. It's a really great tool. The really nice thing is that it translates really well over to the developers. So you can give them exact measurements, like specific specs on timing, spring, like other curves and stuff like that. But as I said, it can be a little intimidating. Then there's Pics. This is kind of a good happy medium for Framer. So you can see in the upper left, you have all the sort of layers over there, very similar to Sketch or any other tool that you would use. And then on the right, upper right-hand corner, you can see sort of the specifics. So instead of, like with Framer, you have to write the code yourself, here you can just sort of like put the transform and rotate stuff. So you can just plug it in right there. And you also see in the bottom left over here, these interaction components. So you can just say like, on tap, rotate this. So it's a lot more intuitive than Framer.js, and you can get up and running pretty quickly. It's really good for micro interactions, not so much for long flows. The one that we're here to talk about today, Principal. So I love Principal. I use it like almost on a daily basis for work. It has a very similar interface to Sketch. So if you're familiar with that, you're basically good to go. I think their tagline is something like, totally new, yet completely familiar. So you're not really starting in from nothing. The really nice thing about Principal is it's good for flows, too. So you can kind of get those custom micro interactions, unlike Envision, which just has the like, oh, slide over, dissolve, whatever. You can do custom transitions there. And then the last one I want to talk about really briefly is native code. So obviously, in the context of this conference, that's Android Studio. But if you're designing for iOS, that could be Xcode, Swift, or for web, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Obviously, native has a ton of benefits because it's already native. So when you hand it off to the developers, it's already like halfway done if you do an animation. But again, it can be kind of intimidating and sort of tedious and time-consuming. So I kind of mapped all these out on a graph. So the x-axis right there you can see is good for flows on the right side, bad for flows on the left side. And then the y-axis is in terms of fidelity. So the top part is for high fidelity, and the bottom part is for low fidelity. So I think you guys know where I'm going with this. But Principal is really great because it has a low learning curve. So you don't have to put in a lot of effort or time to get something up and running really, really quick. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into Principal and give you guys a quick demo of how it works. one thing that I wanted to mention is if you want to follow along, Principal is available with a free, I think it's a 14-day trial, and I mean, I don't work for Principal, so this is like totally from my heart. It's a really cool thing because it counts by the days that you use it. So if you use it today and then you don't use it for a month, like that next day is day 2, a month later. So just really on board with their business principles. And you can download the sketch file if you want on the Android Summit website. It's underneath this talk. Or if you want to follow along later, if you just want to watch, totally cool. So here is the Principal interface. So basically, like I said, very similar to Sketch, they use artboards. Here's this artboard over here. In the upper left, we have sort of the formatting controls like fill and opacity and that kind of stuff. And then over here, we have sort of where we can click around and see the animations, and you can record video and export directly to Dribble if you want, or Movie or whatever. So just to show you the basics, you can use them up here, obviously, but shortcut command for creating a rectangle, I'm just going to drop that in the middle there, and then I'll duplicate this artboard. And then I'm just going to scale this up. And so you see on this layer, I have this little lightning bolt right here. When I tap on it, I have the option to choose any of these. So I'm just going to do a tap, and then spaghetti code, slide it over to this second screen. So you can see already here, it's already doing it. So let's do this on the way back. Now you just have a really quick, easy animation. And Principal basically just takes any layers that are named the same thing, and then it knows that you want to move them. So if I wanted to customize this transition, you see if I click on this sort of connecting line up here, then I can change any of this stuff. So I can, do an ease in, out, customize the spring. So let's do a spring on both, just so you can see what that looks like. So now it's adding a little bit of spring. And I can obviously exaggerate that more if I want. If I go back to this screen. So you can see kind of what that looks like. There's more complicated stuff like drivers up here. And I don't think we're going to have time to get there, but basically what drivers do is they allow you to set keyframes. So if you want to associate certain layers, like on scroll, then have this do this. You can sort of connect them. Like when this gets to this point, then have this other thing happen. So, all right, I'm going to delete this and show you guys what we're going to do. So this is the app that we're going to build right now, a flow for. It's really sad that the Olympics ended, so I decided to do something in homage to that. So basically, we're going to hit the Get Started button. It's going to slide up, offer you username and password, lets you sign in, and then we'll have the slick material design animation where the username slides up to the top to let you put it in. Sign in, you get to this feed view. There's Michael Phelps about to win gold. And then you have a following feed here, and then we'll do like a tap on the floating action button, have these sort of spin out. So the sketch file that we're going to use is this one, and I've just kind of customized it a little bit so that the layers are good to go and we can just sort of power through this. But it takes some trial and error to get used to at first, but then it's really intuitive. So what I'm going to do is just import this right now, and you can set how you want to import it. So I'm just going to do ×2. So I'll import it. And now you can see our layers right here. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to duplicate this artboard, and then I'm just going to drag this whole thing, the keyboard and the button down, and then I'm going to set this sign-in opacity to 0% and have the text change as it comes over to this one. So then on this one, I'll set the opacity to 0% for the Get Started. And then we'll just do on this button, I'm going to do the same thing I just showed you guys. Drag this tap over here. So now you can see, let me make this bigger. So when I tap this, it's just going to slide up. So we're making progress already. All right, now let's have this logo sort of scale up. And then we'll set the scale over here to 0.75. So now we should have, perfect. Okay, so we want this guy to disappear. So we'll set the opacity of this to 0. And then I'm just gonna grab these guys, move this guy over here, and then we can have these fade in too. So let's just see what we got right now. So if I click on this, get started, cool, that looks okay. Let's grab this cursor. I'm gonna put it over here too, so we don't need this. Okay, so now I'm gonna put in the text just like in Sketch. If I hotkey the T, I can type in username. So same hotkeys as Sketch, but if I do Control C, I can get the hex code value here. And then I'm going to set the opacity of this to 70%. Well, let's do an Android standard Roboto light. Cool. Okay, then I'm going to do the same thing. Let me see here. The same thing for the password. Okay, so now we want to do on tap, we basically want the username to go up to the top. So what I'm going to do is create just an invisible hotspot. So the difference here in principle is that I have to actually set the fill to 0, not the opacity, because if the opacity is set to 0, then it isn't clickable. It doesn't realize that it's there. So I'm going to set the fill to 0 in here, and then have this. So we'll duplicate this, and then we're going to have the username, which is this guy, slide up here, set this to 14. I said 14. And then set this to medium. So now we'll have on tap, we want this to go here. So let's see. If I tap get started, cool, we're here. And then the username goes up. So to hack this, to have the cursor sort of flashing, there I can duplicate this artboard right here and have set the opacity of this cursor to 0. And then I'll do, there's an auto transition here. So down here at the bottom, I'm going to drag this over to here. So now when I hit get started, oops, I forgot to do it back the other way. So now this guy, if I take this artboard and auto it back here, now we should get, it looks like it's, and we can also adjust the curve of that cursor so that, let me see here. If I set the curve here, we can do sort of like an ease both, so it looks a little smoother like a real cursor. Let's do ease both. Okay, so now we've got hit get started. There's our cursor, can tap that and it goes up. And I guess another thing that we want to do is add another fake hotspot up here so that we can sort of dismiss the keyboard and it should go right back. So again, I'm going to set the fill to 0 right here. And then I'm going to do a tap and go back. So now I'm here. If I tap out of this, it'll just go back. Perfect. And then the username goes up. All right, so making progress. We can also do the cursor again so that it flashes again, but I don't want to like waste any time with repeat stuff. So let's jump on to the next screen. So if I take this guy, this red button now, and I'm going to do a tap, spaghetti code this over to our feed here. And now we get to this feed. So the reason I put this here in this funky way is Principal knows whatever is associated with the artboard gets dragged in with it. So I'm just going to move this over to the side, because what we're going to do now is tap on these to have it slide over, and it will know to come in from the other side. One thing that takes a little getting used to in Principal is it sort of like auto readjusts the artboards for you. You can't move them yourself. So you'll see that in a second. So what I'm going to do here on this screen now is create another text. I'm just going to replace these because the opacity on the following you can see is 70%. So we want that to change when you tap on it. So let's do Roboto medium, set this guy to white, and then we'll just center this. Cool, close enough. And then we're gonna have to change the label of this because since I didn't change the label of password and username tab, so here's following, and I'm gonna set this opacity to 70%. And now I'm just gonna get rid of this one that we had there before. And this guy I'm gonna have to label too. So we'll do following. Okay, so now we're gonna duplicate this guy. Oops. You have to make sure that it's on the entire artboard. So I'm gonna duplicate this. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna have these guys slide over. So this is what I was talking about, how it's weird, like it's overlapping and you're like, what's wrong? But it'll move by itself. So now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna make another invisible hotspot here. So when you tap on following, it'll transition over to that screen. So again, fill, not opacity. Set this to 0. Then I'm gonna drag this guy over to this one. Cool, that worked. And then when it comes over here, what we're gonna do is move this tab slider over to the right, and then change the opacity on both of these. So now the opacity is 100, and then on this guy, we're gonna set it to 70%. Okay, so now it's gonna go at least one way. So we're in here, we're gonna tap on following, it slides over. Woo, we did it, okay. Then I'm gonna copy and paste this again over here, just the invisible hotspot, and we'll have this one transition back to this way. Okay, so now we've got this going. Okay, that one isn't because it's the same thing in Sketch where the layers matter. So this hotspot layer has to be on the top so that you can actually click on it. So now it should work, yep. Okay, so now the problem is like these are long sort of scrolling screens, but we can't move them, they're static. So that's an easy fix. If I click on the feed over here, there's this option to make it a scroll right here. So I'll have a vertical scroll. And then I'm just gonna drag this guy up to the top where we want it right here. So now I can scroll here. Okay, I'm gonna do the same thing really quickly to this feed. So scroll, gonna have this guy, same thing, come up here. And now you can scroll on this one too. Cool, all right, so let's see what we got so far, the whole thing. So tap get started, great. Can have this transition there, sign in, comes to here, we can scroll on both of these, tap over here, and now for the last thing is doing the cool like material flyout. So I'm gonna duplicate this artboard right here, and then I'm gonna grab this floating action button and I'm gonna turn it to 45 degrees so it becomes an X. And then I'm gonna grab, so I have, as you guys saw in this sketch file over here, we have these two, which these buttons like don't mean anything, I just put them there to show you guys. So now what we're gonna do is here in principle, which I don't know why this isn't showing up. All right, let's see if, just do this the old-fashioned way. So, oh, that's why. Okay, cool. So here is my other sort of buttons. I'm just gonna slide them out here. So there's one, and there's the other one. So have those guys there. And I purposely set the rotation so that when they fly out, they'll spin. So I'm just gonna set the angle now back to 0, so they're facing the right way. So I do a 0 here. And then I'm gonna do on this floating action button, just do an on tap over to this guy right here. So now when I tap it, they're gonna spin out. Cool, so I'm gonna do the same thing going back the other way. And now that should work. Cool, so now what we wanna do is add a little bit of spring to it. So if I go to this animation view right here, you can see the Y, and we'll just set this to spring, the Y to spring. I'll make this like really bouncy. So, okay, so now when I do it, all right, that's a little much. Let's try 10. Ship it, it's ready. All right, so coming back to this guy. All right, well, we can play around with that. So let's see what we got here. I'm gonna dismiss this guy. So we've got this whole thing here. You can say like get started, tap on the username, sign in. Got our feed and our following that we can scroll on. And we've got our springy action buttons. Okay, how am I doing on time? 4 more minutes? Okay, that's not enough time to quite do what I wanted to do is do sort of like spring animation with the rings and then have that turn red and sort of expand out to become this sort of header. So shout out to Aaron for that idea. But I don't think I can do it in 4 minutes. So. But now that's all right. Well, let's see how far we get. Okay. So basically, we want to adjust this transition. So when you hit sign in, that this will sort of like blow up here. So one of the hack ways that we can do it is just create. So in principle, there are no sort of like circles or any other shapes, but there is a way to round the radius. So we can just like increase it a ton. Make this sort of red guy, and then we can scale this down to like 0.5. So now we have this guy, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set it on this screen, and then I'm going to set the opacity to 0 on this one. On this guy. So now, okay, this is going to look weird for a second. Okay, so what we're going to do is take inside the logo these like 3 sort of rings separately and have it be on tap over here. So I'm going to duplicate this artboard and then set this guy to the opacity of 0 right now. And then have these guys. So there's a way, one thing that I think Principal still needs to work on is their auto transition. You can't control the speed of it. So the hack that I've discovered for that is to just put an object with an opacity of 0% and have it move position in another screen, because then it senses that there's an object and you can adjust the timing on that. So that's what we're gonna do. So if I grab, if I just put like this invisible square up here, with, we're gonna have to do the opacity is fine here because it's not gonna be tappable. So if I set that over there, and this is just like fake layer, can just move that over a little bit so it senses that there's a movement. And now when we do from this screen, so when we tap the sign in button, we're gonna have this go to this screen instead of this one, and then we can have them transition up. So this guy now, we're gonna duplicate this guy again, and then change the order of the layers. So we want that guy to be over there. So just so you guys can see the spring starting to happen. Set this 0. So now we have this red button tap over here. I'm gonna do auto. So we're gonna tap on this whole artboard, and we're gonna have it auto transition over to this one. So this is gonna initiate the sort of interaction right now. So This is going to be like the middle ground, so it's going to look a little weird. But when I tap sign in, you can see they like kind of bounced out and then back in. So we can adjust this guy in here, add some spring to all of these. So we'll do these 3. Let's see how that looks. Sign in, okay. So now with this auto, we can also adjust the speed. So in here, what I'm going to do is, let's do default really quick so we can adjust the timing on this. We can decrease it over here. And then, okay. Let's set some spring on it. Okay, so spring automatically defaults to the entire length of the animation. You can't adjust this. That's one of the bummers about it. All right, this one, I think I got it in a little over my head. This one's like, you need some time to play around with, and I didn't like prepare this part, but you can definitely do it, and it looks really good. Yeah, I don't know, does anybody have any questions? The auto transition, that you can't adjust it. So like, even with the hack with the cursor where you want it to be flashing, like it'd be really nice if you could change the timing of those. And it doesn't like instantly go. You have to like set each stage of the animation.
So your next step in transitioning this to a developer now, would this port into Android Studio?
So this does not port into Android Studio. That's actually a really great segue. So basically the options that you have now that we have this whole interaction is I can export this. So you have multiple options. If it's web, you can do an arrow cursor or touch. But so I can record this as a video. So I can just go through. Okay, now it's going to be whack. So can do that. Whatever it's ready to go, then Control V, yeah, is the video. So here you have the options to export it as a .mov or a .gif. So you can just give them the animation file like that. Or you can give them the constraints, which is what I've often done. So I'll give a GIF or a .mov so they can see it, but then I can say like, okay, here's what's happening. Okay, they're all like normal transitions, and it takes like, here you can see like this is 0.3, this is 0.93 seconds. So you can give them all the sort of specific details, and like you saw on the spring, if I change this, I can say, oh, the tension is this much and the friction is this much. That's what it looks like. So it's more that I can easily give them the values without having to do any code. Like it's just kind of like spaghetti code, playing around with numbers.
Yeah, so there's no code that comes from Principle into Android Studio?
No, not yet. I bet they're working on it though. They're a pretty good team.
So are these values, do they directly translate into things in the development tools?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is there like a set of hotkeys for a lot of the more common actions you were doing? I feel like you could have gotten there in time if there was like a hotkey for alpha 0 and things like that.
There might be. That's a really good question, and probably something that I should invest in since I use this all the time. The ones that I know are the really basics, like R is to create a rectangle, T for text, and then like obviously Command D, the normal like copy, paste, all that stuff.
So you showed earlier that kind of graph you made as far as fidelity and how well it handles flows. Is that something that you generated based on personal experience with all these different tools?
Yeah, that's what I made. So
you've used all these, and Principle's the one you've landed on?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, each sort of design project has its different needs. So I think Principle is definitely for a little higher fidelity down the line when you need these sort of custom transitions, whereas Envision, when you're first trying to figure out what the app should look like, you're like, okay, does this even make sense to people? Like, it doesn't matter what the animation is if it doesn't make sense. So Principle, like on this screen here, it's definitely in the sort of like higher fidelity one, but it's really good for extended flows with sort of like micro interactions.
I just have one question.
Yeah.
So when you set up the animations, can you save them and reapply them to other elements? You're not doing it from scratch every time?
I think you can copy and paste certain things, yeah. Yeah, but like with the hotspot or whatever, you're like, okay, here goes another like invisible. So what you can do though is just copy and paste that one and move it over. The good thing about that one is that even though the layer is named the same thing, it doesn't matter if it transitions, because it is actually moving on the screen. We just can't see it because the fill is set to 0. But yeah, in that case, you can do it because it's like invisible to the user. It's just like, oh, hotspot moved over here. So you can copy and paste that. Cool. Thanks, guys. Let me leave you with this. So if you are interested in Sketch or Printable, there are the web links. Definitely recommend them. The workflow is super fast when you use them both. So thank you very much.